Okay, well, I've come down to the river down here today. These are beautiful, beautiful views. I'm a little bit out of town. I've come out here for the quiet. I just wanted to tell a story. It's a long story, and sort of split in two bits. So it's mostly about demons and so-called ghosts and the spiritual world, really, and what it can actually do, how real it is, how it can actually affect you, and all those sorts of things. Um, I remember growing up, I was only young, and I remember Mum telling me stories about when she lived in England, and when they lived in England, they lived in this particular house, and children had died in this house, and it affected my grandmother in such a way that she actually put her head in the oven and tried to turn the gas on. And Mum remembers she had a friend that was a ghost, that she thought was a ghost at the time, called Charlie, who used to follow her around and touch her on the head and move stuff around and things like that. So I remember growing up hearing about that. That was about the only thing I really sort of remember from that time. And then it came to about the time when I was about 17. My mum and dad had split up because of violence and stuff. And so I was living with my mum in this house with my other little brother. And this is the first house. So this is in Maryborough in Queensland. It's at Connolly Street. I can't remember the number now. It's been a long time. But the house in Connolly Street, it didn't start straight away. But what would happen would be in the middle of the night, you'd hear a knock on the door. And then you'd get up, you open the door, there'd be no one there. This went on for a while. And so one night, me and my brother, we were getting really sick of it. We were talking about it. We're going to stand there, and when this person knocks, we're going to open that door and we're going to smash them, like, you know. So I remember one night we heard dunk, dunk, dunk on the door, and we flew downstairs, sorry. We were upstairs, and there's no one there. So we had planned that we're going to stand there, because it would happen again. So we stood there and we're waiting, and it went dunk, 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 dunk. And it was like, it wasn't just little taps, it was bang, bang, bang. We opened the door and there was absolutely nobody there. I mean, and there's no way they could have gone in the 2 seconds it took 1, 2 to open the door. We would have seen something. There was absolutely zilch there. You would also hear footsteps walking up and down the stairs, particularly if you were sleeping downstairs, because you could sleep downstairs and you could nearly sleep under the stairs. It was like one of those sort of houses. And you would hear, da-da-da-dunk, da-da-dunk, and there'd be no one there. And the other thing that sort of happened in that house was the back door would slam all the time. We just thought it was the wind a lot of the time. But there was one night there where I particularly had latched it and locked it because I was sick of the banging. And there was no wind that night. There was nothing. And that back door went bang, bang, bang. And I was like, so it was an old aluminium one, like a screen door. And we went out there and the door was locked and still shut. It was very odd. So that was sort of really, at that point, that was the most sort of things that had happened. Things were sort of went disappearing a little bit too, and they'd move around. And at this time, we were talking more about what Mum had experienced when she was a child, because it was the same. It appeared to be the same sort of thing. We were sort of wondering why. Now, why did it start up then? Was it because of the breakup, or was it because of that house? Not sure. I'd like to maybe go back one day and talk to those people in that house and see if anything had happened since. Anyway, so that's probably 1995. Over the next few years, I move away to a few different places. My brother moves, and we end up back in Maryborough together. And I remember we were at my brother's girlfriend's house, and my brother can be a little angry. That's a family trait. And he was like, he hates clocks, hates them. And he's standing there and he's like, I wish that effing clock would effing stop. Anyway, that clock flew off the wall and then hit the ground. And I remember us both just looking at each other going, wow, like what happened here? Like that was very odd, very strange thing to happen. So before I go any further, I do actually want to say that I'm now a Christian, and I believe in Jesus and the Lord Jesus Christ and God above and the Holy Spirit. And at this point in time, I didn't believe. I thought there was something, I didn't really know what. I was into all sorts of weird stuff. Same with my brother. We'd been to church a couple of times as kids, and God was talked about like this vague thing somewhere that happened occasionally, sort of thing. So it wasn't really personal or anything like that. So I'm going to tell these stories not to glorify the darkness or the demons or any of these things that are in this, in these sorts of things. I don't give them any glory at all. They were just there to, I think they were toying with us. They're there to play with us. They're there to scare us. And then if you're a Christian, they are definitely there to either get you off the track of where you should be or should be doing, or to disrupt your life as much as possible. So I don't tell these stories at all for fun. I tell these stories to sort of random people who I think I can trust, but I'm putting this out there because I think people need to hear this, and they need to know that this sort of stuff is actually real, particularly in the Christian world. I remember going to Christian people in churches and things like that, and you didn't always get a very positive response. Sometimes it was like, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to say. That'd be like from pastors and leaders. No idea. To, no, none of that's real. It's just all in your head, or it's just stuff happening, or you're demon possessed for, because you didn't do, some religious, legalistic rubbish. So anyway, that's a bit of a caveat. So yeah, so the clock flew off the wall. We had that house in Connolly Street. Fast forward to 2000, I would say. Me and my brother, a couple of mates, we moved from Maryborough. We haven't really had anything much happen in this time frame. And we moved to the Sunshine Coast, and we moved to Maroochydore. Now, I can't remember the name of the street, but if I can find it or remember it, I'll put it up. Now, this house that we lived in next was, I would say it was actually evil. Something was in that house. I'm not quite sure if it was because we were there or if it was already in there and it can only affect some people. I'm not really quite sure. It's probably another place I'd like to go and actually talk to the people who live there now. But anyway, so we're in this house. We lived there for probably a bit longer than 12 months. And initially, nothing really happened. It just seemed it was great. We're living on the sunny coast. We're down the beach every day. There's girls everywhere, and we're just having a great old time, partying up, all that sort of stuff. And so the things that started in the house were probably quite small. Things would move, like my wallet or my phone, keys, things that should be in the kitchen or in the lounge room, like pepper shakers and things like that. That sort of stuff would shift around. And that's sort of how it sort of started. The next thing that started was the arguments. And so there would be some pretty horrific arguments with people who were in there who were family and who had been friends for a long time. There seemed to be a lot of weirdness happening with that. Then I think the first thing I actually really noticed was I got up one night out of my room, and as you walked out of my room to the left, you looked down the stairs and there was a TV there. And I could have swore there was someone sitting there watching the TV. The TV was on. And it was like I didn't really pay too much attention to what was on, but to me, I was thinking at the time, it was nearly like Poltergeist. They were sitting there watching just like the snow on the TV. When you try to tune an old TV in, sort of thing. I'm showing my age there. So I saw that, and then I think I mentioned it to my friend Dave and my brother Guy, and I'm not sure if Robbie lived there at that time. And they were like, "Don't know what you're talking about." I'm like, "Well, one of you clowns was there watching the TV. Don't be pulling my leg." And they both swore black and blue that it wasn't them. So I just thought one of them's just, they're just mucking around with me. Then the next thing that started to happen was the video player. Now I'm definitely showing my age. We had a video player. Yes, we did. The video player would stop and turn itself off all the time. We took it to the electrician. They couldn't find anything wrong with it. It's never done it previously. And as far as I know, when my brother moved, it never did it after. So whatever was in this house was just, you'd be watching the thing and the thing would just turn off. And you'd be like, what? So you have to get up, find the remote, turn the thing back on and press play. So sort of harmless stuff. Then it started, then my dog died. My dog, I sadly had to have it on a runner. And at the time I thought when the dog jumped the fence and it sadly hung and died. But that dog had been on that runner for ages. I'd had that dog for, quite a few years. Very smart dog. But it decided to try and jump a back fence. It had never done that before. It was really disheartening and horrible at the time. But that's what happened. That was one of the next things that happened. Then after that, my brother started. I didn't actually find this out for many years later, but my brother said that I started to get up in the middle of the night and knock on his door. Sometimes he was there and sometimes his girlfriend was with him. And he would open the door and I would just stand there and stare at him and say nothing. So he actually put a lock on his door. Actually, I remember that. I remember him putting a lock on the door, thinking, why are you putting a lock on the door? He didn't actually say anything at the time. And I was like, man, that's weird. So it was actually affecting me in some way. I was getting up. I don't remember that at all. But anyway. Then probably the first thing that really freaked me out, they had a bath in that house. And there was as you laid in the bath, on the other end of the room was a full mirror. I think there was like 2 or 3 of them there. That's quite wide. You could see nearly the whole room. And beside me was a rack with a towel on it. And I'm laying in the bed, not in the bed, in the bath. And I remember this feeling of unease come on me. And then the towel, dead set, lifted up and then went back down and then did it again. Man, I was out of that bath so fast. So fast. I got out of that bath. And that's when I knew something was up. I knew something was happening. My mum, who was a Christian at the time, had come to visit. I think this happened twice. Every time she came all the way from Toowoomba, so we're talking about a 3-hour drive, to visit me and my brother, she'd be there for not long and she'd have a migraine and she'd have to leave. They had a cat one trip and the cat just hid itself in the cupboard and wouldn't come out. Mum just got incredibly creepy, horrible feelings about this place. And she would just, become ill, violently ill, and just have to leave. So then people start moving out of the house. The arguments were getting pretty severe over the smallest stuff. And I think I know what it was. So one thing that happened was my mobile phone had gone missing. Now this is a phone in 2000. It's like this big brick looking thing. Couldn't find the thing anywhere. And I'm accusing people of stealing it. This had been happening. The wallet, the keys, the phone, constantly moved around in weird places. Anyway, I went out and got another phone, probably a Nokia 3310. And there were some boxes under the house in the garage that hadn't been opened. And I went looking for something. I can't remember what it was now. And dead set, in the bottom of this box that's taped up, here's that phone in that box. And I remember looking at that thing, and I told my brother about it and my mate. This was actually nearly towards the end of when we moved out. And they were just like, no way. I'm like, yeah way, man. That's where I found that phone. in the bottom of this box. So I have an uncle who's quite, well, I'll just say he's not always very pleasant, and he's always drawn to trouble, big time, in and out. He loved coming to this house and visiting us. We didn't always really enjoy his visits. His visits would often quite end up in punch-ups, cops, blood. That happened quite a few times. And my mum was like, why is he drawn to that house? You know, that house seems to be drawing him there. There was just something up with that house. Then this was probably the night that I knew that we had to get away and we had to move. So it's a split level house, and you've got a set of stairs that you can actually see. I'm just imagining a set of stairs that would be running in front of me. And you can see you've got the upper level, and then you've got a garage underneath that. So me and my mate, I had a gym set under the house, and we're working out. And we heard bang, 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 bang up the steps. Someone, like, 2, 3 people maybe even, running up them steps like there's no tomorrow. And me and him were like, there's someone in the house, let's go get them. So you had the front section, which was like a big long driveway, up a hill, concrete, and that sort of just came into the front of the house. And then at the back you had a set of brick, uneven, crappy stairs, and then that went to a gate that was locked, and then the back sliding door. Anyway, we get up that back sliding door, we go in the house, and everything's locked. But the back door was unlocked because we went up there, but everything's locked. We can't find anything. We're looking under beds, we're searching around, we're going, wow, okay, there's just something not right here. So I said, well, look, it might have been some people or something. So we'll just lock everything up, and we'll go back. Anyway, not 2 minutes into what we were doing, same thing happened again. People, something running up the stairs, a big loud crash sound. Now this time that front door was locked, right? I went one way, Robbie went the other. We both met in the middle of the house, and there was nothing. There was no one there. Nothing to be seen, nothing to be found. And then everyone else had moved out and it was just me. And I was trying to find somewhere else to live at the time. And I wasn't there for long, but I think I was just packing up the last of my stuff. So that pretty much maybe the last night I was there, this really freaked me out. I was laying in bed and I was asleep. And I remember waking up and I heard breathing, like right next to my ear. And then I heard whispering. And I remember thinking to myself, I was really freaked out. If I don't want to know what they're whispering, because if I know, it's something very evil and I could die. So anyway, so then that's probably the PG version of that house. Right? So then we were like, we need to be out of here. This house is just tripping. So we all moved and we all went our separate ways. I then went off and I got married. I mean, the only thing that probably did happen that was a bit unusual was I nearly had 3 car accidents, pretty bad ones too. One of them was definitely not my fault. One of them was I was speeding, and I was doing quite a bit more than I needed to do. But that time I was in this little car with some friends and we were going down to the Gold Coast to go to Movie World for the weekend. And this car pulls out in front of us and I just managed to somehow chuck it in second and glide round this car like it wasn't there. So that was actually quite miraculous. I actually got saved through that, and the people in the car with me. And on the way back on that same trip, the back tyre of the Gemini, we're doing 100 up the highway. It just flew off the rear back thing. So we were doing 100, and I felt the car do this weird, like fishy type motion. So it actually pulled over, and then I took back off again, and then the back tyre, like this was on the Pine Rivers Bridge, the back tyre flew off and then rolled a couple hundred metres down the road. It was just absolutely insane. And that freaked me out. I was like, wow, okay, there's something happening here. Then the next car thing that happened was, so this is just before I sort of met my wife now. We were just sort of dating. I was in my Corolla at this point, and we're going up down the highway, and I went to flip the tape, and I just looked down for not long. I looked up, and the traffic had just stopped. We're doing 100. Old Corollas don't have great brakes. So anyway, I remember going up to third, letting the clutch out. We were not pulling up in time. This car was way too close to me. I went into second, let the clutch out, and then I just jerked left. And then, but you know what? God was there looking after me that day. There was this little section of road where I pulled off. I actually pulled up next to the other car. We were window to window, and I was looking at them, and they're looking at me. If I'd hit them, I would have been pulverized. But so I guess, I mean, that's probably a spiritual thing, really. That was a miraculous thing. I should be dead, but I'm not, and I'm still here. So then I go off and I meet my wife, and we get married, and we decided that we were going to move from Brisbane, where we had been for a couple of years, and we went back to the Sunshine Coast. We lived in a couple of houses. It was this time that my second daughter had just been born. She might have been about 6 months old. So this is now 21 years ago. And my mum had been bugging me for years to go to church and stuff like that. She had become a Christian at this time, and my stepdad. And I was like, just leave me alone, please. And then one day I just said, you know, whatever, if you just shut up, I'll just come, okay? Just, you know, I thought I'll just appease her and go and do this religious thing. And then, but it was amazing. It was like the pastor was there speaking to me. I mean, I can't remember what he said, but I remember things has changed, and I just knew that God was real. Probably not long had these car things happen. I lived in this house, so I'd been into runes and tarot cards and spiritual stuff. You know, I had a whole book on that, and I'd go try different things like astral travels and all this other garbage. So I knew there was a spiritual world, but I didn't think it was the Bible or God or Jesus or the Holy Spirit or anything like that. So anyway, so I've become a Christian. I mean, I'm only just a Christian here, just. And I remember, so I was staying at home with the kids that day. I was doing uni. And I thought, the kids are down. I'm going to go have a quick nap on the lounge, you know. So, and I remember waking up. I vividly remember this. This was so freaky. And I'm looking down upon my body, and I'm laying on the lounge, and I heard God say to me, "Sean, Satan is in your house." And I was like, "What? What do you mean?" And then I woke up, and I looked around, and I couldn't move. I was stuck there. And I felt like something was, like, you know, taking the breath out of me, like I couldn't breathe and I couldn't speak. And I remember rolling off the lounge and then crawling across the carpet like a 2-year-old. And I remember being able to rebuke whatever it was in Jesus' name. I knew that much at that time in my life. And then it stopped and it went away. So I rang my mum, and she was like, "Oh, well, funny you say that. I'm just reading this book on spiritual darkness." And, you know, it talks about things in your house and in your life and stuff. And I was like, "Oh, okay, fair enough." And so anyway, I got a copy of that book somehow. I can't remember now. Mum might have even sent it to me. And I read that book, and it talked about the movies you watch, the music you listen to, the things you have. And I was like, okay. You know, I was into metal that is probably not even very good as a non-believer, you know. You know, it's got Satan in it and, you know, demons, and it, you know, it was pretty dark stuff. A lot of negative music as well, you know, like if it was negative and, you know, life was crap and what are we going to do, I really liked it. So anyway, so I actually threw all that stuff away. We had tarot cards and runes and books on astrology and so much stuff. You know, I had some horrible horror books that are, I won't say authors and things, but, you know, they were pretty intense, you know, very, very graphic, very violent sort of things. So I got all that, threw it all in the bin, put it in the trail. I ripped it into pieces and broke stuff and got rid of it. And things calmed down then. Everything was really good. Until we had a couple of houses we lived in, and then we had to move, and down the Sunshine Coast was getting a little expensive. So we moved to Gympie here, where I am at the moment. And so this is probably, say, 2005 or 6, probably 6. Yeah, 2006 it would be. And we move into this house on Old Gomborian Road. It's no longer there. It burnt to the ground a few years after we were there. Now this house, the people who lived there before us had had a huge breakup. And it seemed to be the sort of thing where they got out of there real quick. And I found out later that that was actually the case, that there was a huge domestic violence happening at this house, and that, you know, this poor woman had barricaded herself into a cupboard, and yeah, her and her kids were traumatized big time. So we move into this house. Now it's the same as the other house we lived in. Initially, it's nothing really happening. Seems pretty cool. But then it starts, and this place heats up pretty quick after this. My wife wouldn't sleep in the bedroom or in the lounge room. She said she couldn't sleep. She was having these horrible dreams and all this other stuff. The kids were having nightmares all the time. I couldn't sleep. That was the start of it. You would actually see apparitions visually. I'm talking, this is just not me. This is my stepdad and the cleaner, who was not a believer in anything at the time. Jo, I can't remember her name, but she was there cleaning, and she actually saw. And I was like, I was at this point in my life, I was like, oh yeah, we see that all the time here. Like, you know, that's pretty normal. So, you know, so it started out with things moving, really. And when things started moving the way that they did, I knew this was like a reoccurrence of what we'd had in the past. I didn't know why at that time, but it started with stuff moving. Things would disappear, you couldn't find them, then you'd find them in weird spots, all that sort of going on. I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll play Christian music or the Bible, and I'll put it on the stereo. Well, I'd come home and the stereo's turned off. So I thought, okay, well, maybe there's something wrong with the stereo. I'll put it on the computer. I'd come home, the computer would be turned off. I thought, okay, I'll put it on the computer and the stereo, and I would come home and they would both be turned off. That sort of stuff started happening. Now, the next thing I really noticed was the arguments. I remember one day vividly, we were in the Falcon. We come home, the 4 kids and the wife and I. Hey, you know, church was great, la-li, 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 la. We walked into the house, and within 3 seconds, everyone was at each other. Like, I mean, intense. Kids are screaming, I'm screaming, the wife's yelling. It was just like, and I remember I said to everyone, just shut up, stop, go back to the car. We're going to go out. And we did, because I knew at this point, this is fairly early on, I knew at this point that this house wanted us to argue. This house didn't like us, and this house wanted us gone or broken up. I'm not sure what it wanted. It was something. It didn't care. It just wanted damage done to our lives. So I start to pray about it, and I start to rebuke what's in this house. I have some success, and there's times where it would sit outside. You could feel it. Like, I don't know if you've ever had this, but if you have, you'll know what I'm talking about. You could feel something outside the house. You knew where it was, and you knew it was looking at you intently. And I'll get to my sister soon, but yeah, you just knew it was out there. So one of the next things that sort of happened after that, we had a Bible study, and one of the elders from the church was there, and he's Alvin. He's coming in, and he just stops in his tracks, and he's looking around like a madman, going, oh my goodness, and he's walking up the stairs, oh my goodness, I can't believe this, and he's just freaked out. I'm like, well, what's wrong? What's happening? What's going on? He's like, I'm getting a vision. I can see a lady crawling up these stairs, and there's blood from the front going up the stairs, and it's going to this pantry. He says, but there's a door there. There was no door when we lived there, but there's a door there, and then the door gets opened, or it was something like that. It was very, very vivid, and I was like, okay, that's intense. So then the owner came along. Can't remember his name. I remember gingerly, hey, how you going? Just wanted to ask you something really weird. I had a friend said, was there any chance that there could have been blood coming up the stairs and through the house into that door? And he stopped and he looked at me and he went, yep, there could be a chance of that. And I was like, okay, can you tell me what happened? And then he said, the people who were here before you, the boyfriend, whatever, just a piece of crap dude, went schizo, beat the crap out of her to the point where, you know, she's got blood coming out of it all over the place, and she dragged herself, so it's pretty severe here, to that kitchen cupboard and locked herself in there. And then he actually smashed the door off and then dragged her out and then beat her more. I was like, okay, all right. I said, well, and then I told him what I had said, and he was just a little bit, oh, okay, that, like, how would you know that? I was like, well, because someone had a vision about it. And I said to him, well, what else has happened? Like, then I started thinking, well, why is there 3 locks on one of the kids' bedrooms? And he was like, oh, well, that's where she used to lock herself. Her and the kids used to lock herself in this room, and he would go mental. They'd lock themselves in there. The same thing with our bedroom. And this is why I think the kids couldn't sleep in them rooms. The violence that went on left something there, like a residue. We'll get to so we've done the bedrooms, and we'll get to the lounge room now. So the lounge room was downstairs, another split level thing, and all these tiles. It was actually an added extension thing. Now, if you sat there, I remember sitting there one night watching telly, and I could feel that feeling I was talking about before. And I was like, oh my goodness, something wants to get in here and kill me. Like, that's what it felt like. It got so uncomfortable that I couldn't go in that room. I turned the TV off and I was like, I'm not sitting in there. That's just too freaky. Anyway, my sister came to visit. She was like, I don't know, 16 or something at the time. I didn't really want to say anything to her because I didn't want to freak her out. So I didn't say anything about what was going on. And she visits. And she's meant to be sleeping down in the lounge room on this lounge. And I was like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Anyway, she's up the next morning and she's up with the kids up in the other room. And I was like, oh, didn't you like the lounge room? And she said, you know what, Sean? I felt something was looking at me. Something was standing outside that window, glaring at me. And it wanted me. And I was like, oh my goodness. I said, well, now that you mention it, yes, we have had a few problems here at the house. She wasn't too surprised. I think she's seen a fair share of this sort of stuff too. So that was that house. Oh, the other thing that happened was my stepdad and mum come to visit, and we were sitting at the table. This was hilarious. Sitting at the table, and then my stepdad flies up like a kangaroo. Boom! And he's outside. What are you doing here? You don't belong here. You get out of here. And he's chasing after this thing. And I'm like, oh my goodness, we've had an intruder. So I'm going out like, where's this person? Where's this person? And Rob come back and he was like, oh no, it wasn't a person. He said this was, some dark shadow, and it was at the door. And then when he had seen it and told it to leave, it had fled towards the caravan that they were staying in. We had an old caravan outside. Now, the weird thing about the caravan was that me and Mum both had the same experience. So the night that Mum stayed in the caravan, and I had stayed in the caravan, I don't know, a little while before that for some reason. And it was an unwindy night and the caravan would rock and you'd hear tapping and knocking and things. Initially, I thought it was the dog under there, being like a dog does. But I don't think it was, particularly with the rocking. The rocking was really weird. You'd be trying to sleep and the whole thing would just start to shake. And you nearly think there was somebody out there. funny thing about that caravan is that caravan then went from that property to my mum's place in Toowoomba. My brother lived in it, and he started having stuff happen to him. He saw stuff, heard stuff. He was in there one night and the caravan caught fire. Very bizarre story, that caravan. So yeah, so we got to the point where whatever was in this house wouldn't leave, and it would go outside, but it would always come back inside. You would visibly see things running around, the arguments it would create. It was just horrible. It was a very horrible house. In the end, I was like to my wife, we need to get away from this house. We can't live here. I think we would have ended up in a divorce or something, because it was such a negative spot. But what we did find out is that the owner of the house, he used to be the biggest Gympie drug supplier that there was, probably through the 80s and 90s. So that house definitely had some history, and the owner definitely had some history. And I think personally that that's what affected that house possibly. So then we moved from there, and we are able to actually buy a property, 40 acres, about 35 kilometres north of Gympie, at a place called Anderley. And we move into Foster's Lane. And so there's at that time there was a house up our end, and then down the other end of the property, so right down the other end, so 40 acres away. Initially it's okay. I think the first sort of things that sort of happened was, so up our end of the house, up our end of the property, there was our house at that time, and we all lived up there obviously in the house. And the daughter had some weird dreams, very vivid dreams. The dream was that there was a man chasing two children through the forest, and I think he killed one of them, and the other one got away or something, and they were like screaming and calling for help and stuff. She had this quite a few times. It was quite vivid. I remember her quite upset about it. She was sort of maybe a young teenager at the time. So I started with that. Wasn't really too much that happened until you went down the other end. Now, when you went down the other end, this was just a different thing. It was a different thing down there. You would hear footsteps behind you, like physically across the ground. You'd stop and there'd be no one there. Something then would tap on your shoulder, whisper in your ear, things like that. It's freaky as. There was a tenant down there that had come with the house, and he was weird. You know, he would say the weirdest stuff. He was saying he was seeing these creatures that were there, and this dude he'd been on bad drugs, and he'd ran away to get away from the drugs, and he ended up in this house. So I just thought he was just messed up. I knew he was messed up, but he wasn't that messed up. So he starts telling me all this stuff about the dreams he's having and the things he's seeing and all that sort of stuff that's down here at this property. And I was like, oh yeah, whatever. Anyway, he ends up moving somewhere. We got rid of him, he was gone, and happy days. There was a cottage down there that he was living in. We fixed it up, and we had not really a friend, but a friend of a friend sort of thing, move in. Really down on his luck. Had had some horrible personal tragedies and had moved into this house. Now, initially, I just thought that the first tenant, Tony, was just a little bit loopy. But this is where it gets weird. Ken, who had moved in, comes to me and he says, Ken comes to me and he goes, I'm having this dream and I'm seeing these things and this stuff's happening. And I was like, oh, okay. Thinking to myself, I've heard this before. I've had this exact conversation with somebody else. And then I was like, well, I hate to tell you, but the person who used to live here said the same thing. The person who used to live here had taken up the same gambling addiction that Ken had now taken up. that I don't think he had this gambling addiction before, but he had now taken up this gambling addiction. A porn addiction started. He started reporting me about this beast that lived outside that was, so tall and big long fingernails and looked like a tree, and it was like a bloke with red eyes, like a tree bloke with red eyes and all this other stuff. And I'm like, that's the exact same thing that Tony used to tell me. He told me that there was a bonfire with people naked, all running around the bonfire having an orgy and doing stuff. I was like, okay, that's specific, because that's exactly what the first tenant was telling me. And so he gets a little bit freaked out, and I'm like, I think there's something going on down here. This is weird. So I approached the people at my church. They weren't very helpful, a little bit, but not really much. I got a couple of books, and I read a couple of books, and that was a little bit more helpful. But there was another neighbour there. Sadly passed away now. Amazing man. He was a good friend of mine called John McDonald. And I was telling John about this stuff and about other stuff. There was a lot of other things going on at the time. And he was like, oh, yeah, okay, right. Well, how about I'll come over and we'll pray about the place. And I said, well, I've done that. It just doesn't seem to shift. I'm not quite sure what we're meant to do here. So he comes over and we're talking, and all of a sudden he just stops and he goes, there's something here. There's something here. I don't know. It's here. We need to find it. And I was like, what is it? He goes, I don't know yet. I don't know. This is like bush. We're running through bush looking for stuff. And he goes, I think he either said it's rings or it's rocks. I can't remember exactly. Rings or rocks. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he goes, it's here, it's here, it's here. And then he goes over to this spot on the ground. He bends down and he starts pulling up grass. And under this grass, dead set, is a ring of rocks. And he goes, this is where they were. This is where they used to, I don't know, do witchcraft or seances, or God knows what they used to do there. And I was like, oh my goodness. And then he said to me, this was really important, this is not it. There's symbols, Sean. You need to go searching for symbols. It's up to you to find the symbols. And then this will be better. Okay, symbols. So I go to the tenant and I'm like, okay, look, this is getting serious now. Something about symbols. There's symbols. Oh, he goes, oh, yeah, symbols. Yeah, I've seen symbols all over the place. I said, well, what are they? And he goes, oh, they're very hard to understand, but one of them was an Om or Yom or whatever that is, that whichever culture does that rubbish. I was like, oh. So he takes me outside and there's a pot. There's like a saucepan sort of thing, and he picks it up and goes, see, like this. And it was carved into the side of this. And I was like, oh my goodness, there's a symbol. He goes, yeah, there's more. So he takes me around, we find all these symbols everywhere, and this is wow. He takes me to this, it was like a cubby house. It was weird. It was like one little room, maybe a couple of meters square, had like a hammock in it, and it was sort of like under the trees. It was weird. It was in a weird spot, but the door was full of symbols. I mean, chock-a-block full. That whole door was, and I remember looking at it and I got the biggest feeling about this thing. And I said, well, that's it. We're going to have to destroy it. So I don't know if it remembers that day or the next day or whatever, but anyway, I got the chainsaw and I got the Jeep. No, sorry, it wasn't a Jeep, it was a Pajero. It's four-wheel drive. Jeep was many years later. That's another story. Got the Pajero. We go down there. I actually had my uncle there with me, helping me. And look, this was just a building on 4 pillars, like stumps, holding it up. Like, seriously, you get the chainsaw out, you know, I've chopped trees down heaps. You cut it a certain way, it's just gonna fall over. You would think. So anyway, so I got the chainsaw out and I started it, and then I had this overwhelming, something hit me in the chest and said, if you cut this down, you are gonna die. If you do this, you will die. You are gonna die. It was very intense. And I remember thinking, you know what? No, I'm not. I am not going to die just because you say so. I'm going to get rid of this. Whatever it was there did not want me to touch this thing. So I remember cutting the first leg. So I've cut it all the way through, you know, so it's just going to fall. And then as I got to the next legs, there was a black shape. Looked like a man, maybe with a hood on it. Way taller than me. That's probably not hard, but way taller than, we're probably talking 7 foot something. And it was standing there with its arms folded. And I felt it was glaring at me. And this was whatever was projecting this. If you. And it just got really intense. It was, you could feel, the evil you could feel was just, I can't describe it. My uncle, he's like, Sean, just let's get this done, man. Let's chop this down. Let's get this done. Like, he was freaked out. And I'm like, I just need, you know what, God, I need to chop this down. Lord, please help me to chop this down. Anyway, I went and chopped all 4 legs, and it stood there and didn't fall over. And I'm looking at it going, oh my goodness, I can't believe that this won't fall over. This is insane. We tried to push it, wouldn't budge. And I'm like, okay, we'll tie the Jeep, Pajero. We're going to tie the Pajero to it. I've got the snatchet strap. So this is, it's probably a little bit over 1 metre high. I've cut through, towards the middle of the stumps. It should just fall. Tie the Pajero to it, put it on 4-wheel drive and go forward. Snatchet strap. Fairly new, snaps. Wow, okay. What's holding this thing down? 10 ton of rock or something. So I was like, I will not be defeated. I will not be defeated in this. So then we got the snatchet strap, I tied it back together. And the second time, it just fell. And I just felt this instant relief. So whatever, I don't know. I can only speculate as to what was, I think that whatever was there was tied to that building. And I think the dreams that those two men had were real. I think that they were worshipping and having an orgy and parties down at that, because there was a dam there, and they were doing nature worship. Because I did find a picture later on the internet that Ken had described to me, and I took it to him and said, is this what you're talking about? And he said, I wish I'd kept what it was, but I can't remember now. But he said, yes, that was a tall being, looks sort of like a tree, long nails, red eyes, very demonic looking. It wasn't that hard to find, and that was early on in the internet, so we probably nearly had dial-up at that point. So that was down the other end. After that, did it get better? Yes, it did, but not totally. There was always, it would come back and do weird little things, but not really up at our house all that much. But down the other end, if you were down there by yourself, I tended not to go. Not because it scared me, I just didn't like the feeling it would give you. And it would follow you around and whisper at you and tap you, and it was creepy. It was just creepy. So, yeah. Now, I had some Christian friends move in. 2 lots of Christian friends. One Christian friend, didn't bother him at all. His faith was just like, you know what, this thing can just go and jump and I don't really care. He didn't actually have any problems. Another friend of mine moved in, and it was really her kids, or her kid, and some of his friends that were affected, and she eventually moved. The son won't tell me what happened or what went down, but it was enough for him to, we're moving and we're never coming back. Yeah, so I might have to see if I can find him one day and ask him if he'll actually tell me what. Anyway, it sounded like he was pretty traumatized about it. So yeah, so that house seemed not too bad after that. Once I'd broken up that ring, gotten rid of all the symbols, and we cut down this whatever that was and destroyed everything, it calmed down a lot after that. The next sort of thing that happened was probably 2013, possibly. Yeah, so we'd moved away from Gympie, and we come back because there'd been a big flood, and we left for other work, and we came back, and when the flood had finished, obviously a couple of years later, and there was more work around. And so we ended up working at the Ned Kelly up in Maryborough. My wife and her mother were running it. It was very strange. They had all these cabins, and most of them weren't being used. They were filthy dirty. They didn't have a good clean and all that. I'd done a little bit of cleaning, and I'd had my own business at one point doing that sort of stuff. And I was like, yeah, well, I didn't have any work because we'd only really come back. I'll help you out with this. So we did a lot of units, and we got them people in there, and there was 2 units there that they were told not to go into. Don't bother with them. That had a man in there who was very troubled and who had gone schizo, trashed the place, and gone into another unit, broke into it, done the same thing. There was blood through them, and they just were like, we don't even know what to do with them. So I was like, whatever, that doesn't bother me. I'll, glove up and aprons and stuff, and I'll go do that. Anyway, as soon as I walked in there, I knew I was in trouble. I opened the door and I took a couple of steps in and I looked around, and I could understand why they didn't go in there, and they said, don't go in there. The feeling was hugely oppressive. I mean, oppressive. And I'm like, okay, Lord, you're going to have to help me with this one. So I prayed about it, I started praying, and okay, still okay. So I start cleaning stuff and doing stuff. And then I remember opening the cupboard and putting my hand in up the top, and I put my hand on something, and then I had that feeling back. It was just like, oh no, what have I found here? And I brought it out and I looked at it, and it was a bag. And I'm thinking, I really don't want to know what's in this bag, but I'm going to have to look. So I open this bag up, and in there is these maybe Nordic runes, like stones with writing all over them. And I looked at them, and I automatically knew that this is bad news and trouble. So I go outside, I open the bin, and I'm like, Lord, I rebuke these stones in Jesus' name. These stones don't have any right to be here. These stones can go, and they're going to go in the bin. Chucked them in the bin, went and finished that unit, went and finished the next unit. Problems seemed to be gone. It seemed to be all good. Anyway, I stay overnight at that same motel with my wife. And this is probably the first time I actually remember this happening. No, sorry. This had happened one other time at the first house in Gomborian, what I'm going to say. I woke up to something sitting on me and choking me. And I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't move. And it was like, I was a bit like I was being attacked. And I woke up and you couldn't do anything. And I'm trying to speak. And my wife said that I was actually shouting in my sleep, calling out to Jesus, telling this thing to be gone. And anyway, I ended up in my sleep yelling at this thing to get out of here in Jesus' name. And I woke up, and then it was gone, and it left. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's insane. What a crazy night. So then the next day I was actually going to go, I went home back to the farm. And I thought, look, at this point, I thought we're done. Whatever was there was a little bit upset that I'd cleaned up its thing and chucked its runes out, and it was, upset with me. Well, I'd gone to bed, and I woke up that next night with the same thing. Choking, sitting on me, attacking me in my sleep. And I remember waking up extremely angry at this thing. How dare you follow me from where you were to here now? This is my house, not yours. You don't belong here. So I'm rebuking this thing. You can get out of here in Jesus' name. This place belongs to God, not you. Every square millimeter of this place belongs to God. Anyway, it then started to laugh. And I actually physically, verbally heard this laughter. Nearly like Jabba the Hutt, sort of. It It was creepy as. And I'm like, whoa, no. Now you're laughing at me, thinking I'm a joke. I'm like, you do not belong here. In Jesus' name, you get out of here. And then the dog started barking. And while I knew stories that the demons can go into dogs and, and things like that, or in animals. And I was like, no, those dogs belong to me. They're part of my place. You can't have them. You are not to touch my dogs. Then I heard this banging up the wall. I mean, it was bang, 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 bang up the wall. So now I'm outside, probably looking like an absolute crazy person, screaming at this demon that it did not belong and it was going to leave, and this was Jesus's place. And then, you know what? It just stopped. It's like there was nothing there. Okay, so this is the story of Hannah. Now, we were living on the farm, and this is just before we were fixing up the cottage so we could rent it out to a friend of a friend. Weird. This is weird. I don't even know what the whole point of this was, but anyway. So my brother and his friends, we paid them to come and help us, and he brought his friends down to Gympie from Toowoomba. And I met this girl there, I think she was about 16 at the time, Hannah. She seemed really nice. Most of Bruce's friends were pretty good. A bit odd, but pretty good. So anyway, I'm not sure how long after this is, but Bruce rings me up and he goes, I want to talk to you about Hannah. There's some stuff happening and it's just a bit odd, and she wants to come and see you and stay with you. And I'm like, why would she want to come and stay with me, Bruce? I don't even know her. Like, seriously. He goes, well, she had come over a few times. She had freaked out like a possessed person, screaming and carrying on, and and Bruce and his friends couldn't hold her down, and the video player was stopping and kept replaying these murder scenes on this DVD when she was in the house. And I'm like, okay, right, why is all that happening? Well, Bruce told me that him and his friends had decided they were going to hunt ghosts and all this other stupid stuff, and I don't know, go down and play in the sewers, and I think they were Ghostbusters, I guess. Hannah comes to visit, and she says to Bruce, hang on, there we go. Yeah, she says to Bruce, I want to go visit Sean. My mum has axe murdered my brother to death, and she didn't know what to do about it. And I'm like, what? Okay. So I went to Toowoomba and I pick her up and I bring her back. And I remember sitting up there at the table, just talking with her. Like, I didn't really know this girl at all. The more I talked to her, the more I felt like there's something seriously not right with this person. There's something in them. There's something with them. She could say the strangest things in the strangest ways, like she was nearly reading your mind. There was a couple of times there through the conversation, she was not peering at you, but she was looking into your soul, is how I felt. That's how I describe it. And her eyes were just nearly black and unblinking, and it was creepy, really creepy. And I remember it was like about midnight, and I was like, yeah, I just need to go to bed. And then she goes to bed. And the next day seemed okay. And I had to go to music practice at church, and I was playing bass in the band. And I went and got in the shower, and I had this overwhelming thought just come out of nowhere. You're going to die. You're going to drive in, and you're going to die. You're going to have an accident. All these bad things are going to happen. The fear was just intense. I was like, whoa, where the heck, where's this come from? Like, wow, okay. So I got out of the shower and I said to the kids, come here kids, we need to pray. You know, and she walked over, she looked me dead in the eye and she said, oh, I know you need to pray. And I was like, okay, this is coming from her. There's something not right with her. So we prayed and then I had left. My wife had come home then and then I'd left. And I remember I walked into the church and it was actually funny that night. They were actually having an elders meeting or leaders meeting or whatever. And they didn't normally. And I walked in there and I just said, I need to ask you guys something. Like, I don't know what's going on. This is just freaking me out. I said, but there's this girl. And I remember the elder, he just said to me, stop. I don't need to know anymore. Whatever it is that she said or done, she needs to leave. I said, don't you want to know? And he goes, no. God has told me that she has to leave. She has to go. So I was like, okay, consider it done. So I went back home. And I said to her, oh, well, no, she actually said to me, oh, I think it's time for me to go. And I was like, oh, okay, then yeah, that's fine. That sounds great. I'll take you to the train tomorrow. And she said, yeah, okay. So then she says, oh, can I make a phone call, a private phone call? I said, oh, well, there's a phone in my office. You can use that. So anyway, she goes away, uses the phone. I take her to the train the next day, drop her off, told Bruce that his psycho friend's coming home. And I remember then thinking, how can I find out who she rang? So I rang the phone company and I said, look, there was this young girl here. There's stuff going on that I just don't know about. She's saying that, you know, her brother's been killed by her mother and she's made his phone call. And they said, well, because in those days they sent you a piece of paper and you could get the phone numbers that you had rang. They said, well, we'll tell you what that phone number is now. I said, oh, that's great. That sounds good. So they give me the phone number and I ring it up. And I'm like, hey, how you going? My name's Sean. I just had your daughter here. And the mum, she's like, oh my Lord, I'm really sorry, but what has she done? What's happened? And I'm like, well, she's been here. She's saying that you killed her brother and all this other stuff. And she's like, look, she's really, really troubled. She had actually gotten herself into a witch's coven and was into witchcraft and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. And this is what had happened to her. She turned into this weird person. I'm not really quite sure what happened to her after all that. My brother sort of lost contact with her. He saw her around a few times, but he really didn't have much to do with her. I do really pray that maybe she got herself, you know, together, got all that rubbish out of her life and maybe found the truth. But why she went there, what she wanted, what her plan was, I have no idea. It was just very strange. Maybe something in her wanted help. And I was the only Christian person she knew. I don't really know. Or she was there for a mission to destroy us. I have no idea. But that definitely happens. The last story, this is really cool. I really love this. I go to the markets. I'm a support worker. And I take one of my clients there. And look, he just likes to walk around, look at the stuff, talk to the people. And he does it for hours, like hours. He loved it. It was one of his favourite things. Anyway, they had this psychic lady there. So I'm walking past her and I looked over her way and I thought, I don't like this. So I'm like, Lord, I rebuke this demon that's given this woman information. I rebuke this demon, you know, that she's communing with. I rebuke this whole thing in your name. So I'm just praying this in my head. I'm just walking along and I'm praying. And not too much happened that time. So I go back around and the third lap, Dad said there was 50 people there. And out of that 50 people, this woman looked up and locked eyes onto me. She knew it was me praying in my head about her. Whatever demon was in her knew there was spiritual warfare happening right that moment. Whatever it was not happy. I mean, all it could do was glare at me. But obviously, I think that I had impeded its ability to do stuff. So that was pretty cool. So we definitely have that sort of power. So I guess what's the reason that I'm telling you guys all this and making this movie? Well, I think part of it is that in the Christian world, we don't always find people who believe us when spiritual things happen. People can get possessed. I have actually seen people possessed at church and people pray for them. I've seen people scream and cry and go on the floor and shudder at the name of Jesus. Eyes rolling in their back of the head, like, straight out of the Exorcist. I've seen that. I've seen demons possess people because they were in a witch's coven and the weird things they do. Spiritual things in this life can touch us, can make us feel certain ways, can torment us, can make arguments happen in the house. They can do all sorts of crazy stuff. But so as a believer, we have the answers with us. Jesus and the power of God and the Holy Spirit has full dominion over these things. They can't touch us unless, God gives them full authority, which He won't. So we can do something about that. We can confront them. We can tell them to be gone in Jesus' name. Now, will they get disgruntled with you and attack you in other ways? 100%. It's called spiritual warfare, and it goes both ways. So I guess the main thing is that as Christians, we have the power. There are a lot of Christians out there who believe in this stuff and who actually fight against it. There might be a small percentage of the church compared to other things, but there are people in there. There is hope. There is answers. So I really love it when I find someone else in the Christian world who has had these experiences. I've had that happen twice in the last 2 weeks. I've said stuff and then they've gone, oh my goodness, and told me, nearly the same sorts of things have happened to them and what their outcome was that. So my main thing is that we don't have to take it. We have God with us. And, if you're one of these people out there and you're being tormented by these things and you can't find the answers and you don't know what to do, there is a higher power out there. There is a creator God who made all these beings and they are subjected to His authority. So cry out to the Lord. Try it, even if you don't believe it. Even if you don't believe it. So Lord, or whatever you say, Creator, I don't even know if I believe in you, but show me who you are. Show me your heart. Show me your power. Help me with this problem. And see what happens. What harm can it do to just ask? Just to ask and just to cry out. Because there really is only really one answer. Hey, so I just got back and I was just going through all that footage that I'd done the other day down the river, and there was this one last thing that I wanted to add, and it really has to do with generational bondage. It's a contentious issue within the Christian circles and in circles in general, really. But I definitely believe that things can get passed down through the families, and I think that something was definitely passed down through my family. So the what had happened was I'd got this book. Now I can't remember this book. This book has just disappeared. But it was by an author that was a husband and wife. If you know what this book is, please let me know, because I can't remember what it was called. And they had been in the ministry of deliverance for many years. And the book, talked about, if you've got, certain books and DVDs and, things in the house, bringing things in from other countries that are to do with worship, and, Christian people who had problems within their house. Anyway, so I'm reading through this book, and I was reading this one page, and the page was about Freemasonry. And on this page was, 10 to 15 points of what would likely happen if you had Freemasonry within your family, lying somewhere. And I remember reading that, and nearly everything on that was in my family. So my family in general has lots of bad luck. There's lots of anger problems, there's substance problems, and they all seem to do the same thing. They're all affected in the same way. Like my brother, he buys a car, he replaces everything to new, and then one by one, the car just gives him trouble after trouble after trouble with the new pieces that he's brought. That's a recurring theme within my family. That happens quite often, particularly with cars and money and like, yeah, and they all act the same way. So I was like, well, I don't really know any masonry within my family. So at the time, I was still talking to my grandmother. And I went up to her house and I said, okay, I'm going to ask you a question. It's probably a little odd. But I said, is anyone, or do you know of anyone in the family who has been a Freemason? And she said, oh, yes, Sean, 100%. I was in the Freemasonries. I was like, I don't know, some Eastern Star or some garbage. And so was your grandfather. I've actually still got all the bits and pieces. So she goes out and she brings out all the things that they... And I was like, oh my goodness. And she goes, the other thing is like that my grandparents and your grandparent, you know, your grandfather's grandparents, and probably going back a few lines, they were all Freemasons. And I was like, right, okay. So by this point in my time, you know, I was having lots of problems within the marriage and within myself, and my relationship with God was struggling. And I thought to myself, I don't really want to keep doing this over and over and over. And I don't definitely want to end up like my uncles or my father or anything like that. So I rebuked all that stuff. And I said, Lord, whatever it is that these people are into, whatever, I don't want it. I don't need it. And I just rebuke all that stuff, Lord. And that I just want to come to you with a fresh, clean start and not have any of these attachments. And I don't want these attachments for my kids, you know. So, and then from there, things changed. Life got not super easy, because it never is, but life become better. And I totally 100% believe that it was because of the ties of Freemasonry in my life. So, you know, was that part of the reason why a lot of stuff has actually happened in my life, you know, up until this point. All that earlier stuff that I'd spoken about in this video was before I actually read about this Freemasonry and rebuked it. So, well, actually, no, sorry, not all of it. The story about the when I went up to stay at the motel, and then it came back and attacked me at my house. That was actually after this. So yeah, so God's there, and he can do big things, and ask him to show you why you're experiencing something. He might be, you know, your eyes might have been open to the spiritual world because you have to help other people, or whatever. I just found it funny in my life that the spiritual world was open as nearly straight away for me, and so, but that's not the case for a lot of people. So, but there'll be a reason. God does these things for a reason. There'll be a reason, or there's a reason that the darkness actually thinks they have access to your life for whatever it is, for whatever reason they have access to you. So, and I think I would encourage people to do a pretty dark topic, but there are Christians out there now who used to be, you know, devil worshippers and witches and things like that, and they've come out of all that stuff and they talk about it. That is very eye-opening. So, anyway, be blessed, and yeah, see you another day.